All right, I'm going to introduce Joyce Keeshin, maybe. If I get this piece of paper to cooperate. There we go. All right. This is our very good friend, Joyce Keeshin. Joyce could be introduced in many, many ways, but I will choose my words succinctly and carefully. She is a friend. She has wisdom. She has engaged the mystery of the world in some unique ways. And she is willing to have an authentic relationship with the divine. And she's willing to share that with other people, although it is not her nature to do so. Her nature is to be a recluse, to stay in the cave, to live in the nature, be friends with the trees and the birds and the stones, and to ignore the rest of us. So it is our gift that Joyce has accepted our invitation to be here with us today. So you're in for a real treat.
Oh, I've never thought of myself as a recluse. But that certainly gives me a lot of input as to how I was on the pilgrimage I shared. And there is a lot of truth to that. I am very grateful to be here. I'm going to stop saying I had a teacher in high school, an English teacher, and every time we said the word she rang a bell. It was totally unnerving. Miss Prudence, she was there with her bell, or Miss Jewel, and I just said another So I'm going to, and I'm also not used to speaking to people sitting down. So is it Wendy?
Yes, Wendy and Marley.
And Marley, so please forgive me. I'm not likely to be in the seat very much. Matter of fact, I'm going to get up right now. But I am really excited to be here. It kind of forced me to look at my journey. And one of the privileges of being able to be with you in the first hour today was to get just little snippets of your journeys.
Don't worry, just keep
that's
going.
Fine. Okay. So, at this stage of my life, there have been many ways to be journeying. And looking back, I'm able to see some of the threads, see how things fell into place that were totally unexpected. And I'd like to talk about, I started making some notes outside. Actually, I've been thinking about being here with you all for months. And at times it felt daunting. At times it was like, what were they thinking of? Why in the world are they having me come out here? And then at other times it was really exciting. At times the time we have together felt humongous. Like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do during that much time? And other times it felt like we only have 2 minutes. What are we going to do? So this is going to be not tightly structured. I'm not a tightly structured person. I invite you to be very participatory. I don't want this to be focused on my journey. I want it to really be something that opens up possibly some thoughts about your own journey. Because that's what each of us has, is the journey that we're called to. So as I was sitting outside before we gathered this morning, I had that question that Patricia, actually, you mentioned when you were showing me your altar. The question that comes, what am I doing here? And I remember the last time I had that question. And I was in the jungles of Peru. And this was only about 5 years ago. It wasn't on this big, what was to be a big spiritual pilgrimage. I was traveling at the Cincinnati Zoo. And I'd been to Peru a couple of times previously in the mountains, which really had been very intentional spiritual pilgrimages, traveling with some of the people who were indigenous to that land, who were shamans and medicine people. But this was not that. This was through the Cincinnati Zoo. And I realized in some ways that I'd signed on for this because I hadn't made it to the jungles of Peru before. There are different traditions in the mountains versus in the jungles, and I had not made that trip to the jungles. And there was an opportunity, and I was going. And I get there, and first of all, my bag wasn't taken. So it was a big lesson that I carried forward. Always wear what you can live in for a few days, because that was not the case with me. So we're trekking through the jungle, and we keep taking boats deeper into the jungle, and I still don't have a suitcase. And about the first night, I'm reminding myself, I don't like bugs. I don't. I don't like bugs. I don't like snakes. I don't like poisonous things. And so we're walking around there, and I'm in my little clogs that I had traveled with to make it easy to get through airport security, and these same smelly clothes, and there are mosquitoes everywhere. And I don't like mosquitoes. And the tarantulas. I mean, it was just not. So at night, and it was a scary premise to get up to go to the bathroom at night. So we were tucked in underneath these mosquito nets, covering our individual bunks. And I can remember that the second night in, I just kept going. And because my background has been diverse, I do different things at different times. But that night, I was just kind of praying for guidance. And the prayer I kept asking was, you just tell me, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? And finally, I got this response. And the response was, what are you doing here? That was it. And that's the best you got? But I was there. And while it was not intended to be a spiritual pilgrimage, it was a spiritual pilgrimage. All of our experiences can be part of our pilgrimage. And all of our experiences can lend themselves to those moments. You know, whether it's through a new homeowners association member or through a cat screaming at night. All of those experiences can be an invitation. So as I was reflecting on things, and Gil and Kathy had been very generous in letting me be pretty open-ended as far as the topic. What I got in touch with were there kind of again three themes that I can trace back to my earliest childhood and that have carried through much of my journey. And those themes have to do with very much a connection with nature. I can remember as a young child that being in nature felt like my safe place. It felt safer than some of the chaos going on inside my home. It felt, I felt as if nature embraced me, comforted me. I was very, very connected with that. I would notice the soft caress of the wind. I would love to be out sheltered in the midst of a thunderstorm. I would love to just rest on the grass, on the earth, and to get lost in nature. That was my comfort. Another theme for me from my childhood was that deep desire to connect with spirit, and always feeling connected with spirit. And again, I can remember that as being a source of deep comfort and a source of feeling as if I belonged, even in the midst of messages of not belonging. And again, I experienced that a lot in nature, but I also had a longing. And I found myself taking myself to church. My family did not go to church. But I thought, okay, I'll learn maybe more that way. I found myself praying in different ways. I found myself always feeling that direct connection with spirit. I can't remember a time I didn't. And I also found myself having a deep longing to be able to be a source of healing. That longing, I think, also came out of my childhood. My father was ill from the time I was 2 until he died when I was about 11. He had lymphoma. And back in those days, people didn't talk about illness. So I really didn't understand his illness. And I thought it was just me because I was little. I have a brother 10 years older, a sister 15 years older. But they really didn't know the nature of his illness. I mean, even at the time he died, they didn't know because people didn't talk about it. But I have a very vivid memory. I think it was probably his last hospitalization. And they didn't allow children to visit people in the hospital. And I can remember being down in a parking area, and I can remember the rails that I stood up on. And an adult who was with me, I don't know what adult it was, pointing to the hospital and trying to point to his hospital room so I would have a sense of where he was. And I can remember that child me standing on that rail and thinking, if I could just get to him, I could feel him. Now we know that is the magic of thinking of a child, but there was something so deep in me that wanted to reach out to him, that wanted to offer any healing to him. And I didn't realize how deeply ingrained that was in me until later on. As part of my spiritual path, I kept finding myself drawn to healing and recognizing, as we talked earlier, that in many ways the healing had to be for myself first, to be able to offer to others. And also to be constantly healing myself and being present to others in their own healing. Because it wasn't for me to do with someone else. It was for me to be with someone else in their journey. So those I mentioned to you as themes. And as I was thinking about many of the different paths I've walked and the journeys I've been on, nature has seemed like such a prominent part of that and such an opening. But that's how we came to call this session what we did. So, fast forward to maybe, say, 30 years ago. And I was in another one of those times in my life where I was kind of feeling stuck, feeling like I didn't know which way to go. And Wendell Berry has a wonderful mention of that in a poem, and he talks about how when we truly feel stuck and when we don't know where to go, that's when our real work begins. And I know that was true for me. So in that stuck place, and just to give you a little bit of perspective, I had returned to the church after an absence of a couple of decades. I was actually came back and immediately went in spiritual direction, which is one of the reasons I feel so strongly about what you all are studying, and whether it's the mystery school itself or spiritual direction. Spiritual direction's been a profound opener of doors for me. But so there I was in the process for ordained ministry. I was a postulant in our tradition. And I was also a single parent. I was also the primary wage earner. And the church was expecting me to quit work and relocate with my son to a seminary. And I just kept not being able to take that step. I kept going to night school instead, and I kept doing other things, but I kept not doing that one thing that was expected of me. And so I was feeling kind of stuck, and in that stuckness, some new openings came. There was the opening of Carl Jung and his work, and that was an opening of dream analysis. And I met this outrageous Jungian analyst who I had no intention of working with. I mean, I wouldn't have started with him except that I felt like he had insulted me. And so he said, "You're afraid to come see me." And I thought, "I'm not afraid of you, please." But he, because of that, I made an appointment to see him. And in that first meeting with him, which I'll never forget, he said to me, "I don't know if you're meant to be an Episcopal priest or a shamanic priestess, but you have to follow your own nose." So, I mean, not only had he been insulting, now he was just aggravating. I mean, it was like, what do you mean, Episcopal priest or shamanic priestess? I don't even know what a shamanic priestess is, and I know I don't want to be that. And this following my own nose, all I wanted to do was to know what I should do next. I mean, I just wanted to know the next step. And what he was very clear about was that only I could figure out my next step. So that opened many vistas for me, and I've laughed many times because I did become a shamanic priestess before I became an Episcopal priest. Not by intention, it just happened. And the journey has been rich. The dream work also led me into doing more mind and body work. That led me into meditation. That led me into studying Shambhala meditation for several years. Those things led me to a great place called Omega. And I met two nuns at Omega who told me I absolutely needed to read a book by Alberto Villoldo. And reading that book, I became a student of Alberto Villoldo, who was teaching shamanism. That led me to the Southwest. That led me on my trips to Peru. All of these different pieces were giving me guidance in my life that I hadn't had before. They were not making me necessarily a well-viewed candidate for ordained ministry. My spiritual director really wrestled with this. My spiritual director was also my mentor in the ordination process. And he'd say, "Do you have to do these things?" And I would say, "Yes." But it cut many legs because it did. Because in my tradition, through the mystical experience I'd always had in my Christian tradition, I never felt I was separated from that. I never felt like I was going it alone. If I was sitting in a room of Buddhists meditating, I was sitting there knowing that I was fully accompanied by spirit. I never felt out of my track. I felt alone sometimes in terms of doing it so differently from the people I was with, but it all felt congruent to me. So, kind of bringing this back to you all, because I could take all that time talking about my journey, and that wouldn't necessarily be fruitful. It would be maybe fun for me because I like to remember it. But one of the things about studying shamanism was that it gave me a new way to think about healing. It connected me with nature in a way that was very intuitive for me, and yet it did it in a profoundly deeper way. And as I said, throughout, I've never felt separated from spirit. I've always felt embraced by spirit doing this. So with the shamanic path, it gave me a new vocabulary. And within that vocabulary, also a new way of seeing things. I preached a few weeks ago about the difference of looking at versus seeing. And when we look at things, we're thinking, we're possibly judging. We can be critical or we can be appreciative, but but we're separate from. When we see something, we are fully embracing what we're seeing. We're seeing this as, oh, this exists, and connecting with it in some way. We're not thinking about what it could be, what it once was. We're with it in its present state, and we're appreciating what it is. And so with nature, we're able to see a tree differently than looking at a tree. We're able to be very present with a river if we're seeing it versus looking at it in the thought. One of the first exercises we did on one of my first weekends of exploration of shamanic work was we told our life stories. And we had to tell our life story in like 5 minutes. But we told it, and we had to tell the same story over and over and over again. Say it was maybe 5 different people. And what I became aware of was how my life story was always, it was like I had these touch points that I had defining me. And they were my go-to, okay? I am this, I am this, I am this, I am this. And by the 5th person, I could not bear to tell that story again. I mean, I was so bored with that story. And that story I can't remember the story, but I remember it was rich. I mean, it had pain in it, it had rejection in it, it was rich. But by the 5th time, I was done. I was just done. By contrast, we started looking at things like telling our story as if we were a river, as if there were a flow to it, as if we needed to get in contact with what were the elements of that river. How did it change over time? And so rather than my continuing on in this vein, what I'd like to do is invite you all to get comfortable and sit back a little bit. Those who are in the program were asked to reflect on this past year. Just a little bit about what had been some good points, what had been some rough points. Those who are guests weren't given that guidance, but I don't think this will be hard. And so if you can just sit back away from the table a little bit, get into more of a position of meditation. And close your eyes if that's easier for you. Try to ignore the sounds. My second weekend of training in a meditation, I did several years, but my second weekend turned out to be in a gymnasium where there was cheerleader tryouts going on. So it's all good, you know? So just try to be very present here. And I just want to very briefly walk you through some reflection on this past year as a river. And then when we finish, I'll invite you to do something else. Okay, so reflecting on the year, and choose a time frame that makes sense for you. Some things we do in our lives kind of seem to have well-defined starts and finishes. It might be a program of study, it might be your time in this program, it might be dealing with the disease or dealing with a home situation, but try to find the time frame that makes the most sense to you. And I want you to reflect starting at that starting point. and reflect on this experience as if this time in your life is a river. And if out here in the desert, that's too much of a stretch, it can be a path. It can be a path through the mountains or just a path along the way. And try to visualize, what does that look like? What does that river or path look like at that starting point? Is it open and spacious? Or is it rough? Is it challenging? Is it inviting? Or is it a little scary? What is alongside of the river? What do the banks look like? What contains it? The river has a flow to it. What is the weight of the flow? Is it a strong current? Is there an undercurrent? Is it a gentle flow? Is the water murky, flooded? Is there debris? Or is it calm? What rests beneath the surface? What might be supported? Is there a sense of source? Sense of direction? As you travel further over the course of this time, it changes. You notice. Is it scenery change? Do the shores change? Are the trees different? Are there obstacles? Are there places the river seems to run? Continue to go and flow other times, and it seems as if the dam has been cleared. Just continue to notice, looking for clarity, looking for flow, looking for the blue. Allowing that river to bring you to flow. minutes just to kind of get you started. And open your eyes and come back. You may have not gotten the whole length of that time into that time of reflection, but it's about the flavor. So what I invite you to do is to grab a piece of paper, small piece, large piece, and if you're comfortable with drawing, to begin to draw that river, the length of that river, in whatever time frame you say. If you're not so comfortable drawing, then maybe using words to describe it. But speaking in language that's different from our day to day, whether it's language of a river, language of a plant, the language of nature, that acknowledges the pieces, but maybe looks at them just a little bit different. So we'll take about 10 minutes, 12 minutes, however long we need, and please start. Do you have any questions?
Paper and drawing.
It'll just take another minute or two. Um, these are always things you can finish later. For your other stopping point, what I'd like to invite you to do is to group in threes, and threes will work. They can be threes of convenience, or you can spread out a little bit. And not to take too much time, so I want to be mindful of our time. But maybe, say, if we were to take another 10, 12 minutes in these small groups and have each person share a little bit of what they're comfortable sharing about the river they drew. And then we'll come back here and we'll have a chance to talk as a larger group. But feel free to spread out from this room, or feel free to stay here. You might talk with people that you don't normally talk with, who can't complete sentences for you. So anyway, why don't we go ahead and do that? And I've got, what time do you have? Oh, it's right here, 11:40. So if we aim to be back in here by 11:55, we'll be heading back in a little bit sooner than that even. Yeah. It's actually beautiful in the courtyard, and there actually is room for more than one group out in the courtyard. And I will round you up wherever you are. If you need to do 4, that's fine. Whatever works.
Yes, right. That's great. See, there you go. Yeah, I haven't started going. Probably because while I just met Rowan, I still feel like I know her and have a connection. So she'll be okay with that. They'll be okay with this. Yeah, that's true. That is true. You do it. See that hospitality. See? Oh, yes, yes. Oh, is it still ready to stop? Okay.
Okay.
They're kind of used to it. Being kind of amateur.
Oh, there's a message here on the
Oh, is there
other side.
Computer will not give up.
Okay, good. Yeah. Okay. Are we all back? We're not all back.
No, we're enough.
We're enough?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Any comments anybody would like to share with the larger group in terms of was there anything that you noticed differently about describing your life in that way, or anything that struck you? Did it give you any additional dimension or information? Yes. Mm-hmm. I think particularly we engage with something differently than we have before. It takes us to a different place. Thank you. Any other comments? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Other comments. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think nature is such a teacher of the reality of what we can really control versus the vastness of just what is. And I think we cause ourselves a lot of pain under that illusion that we have of decision and control. Yeah, trying to move in the opposite direction from the flow of the river is very hard. Yes. Mm-hmm. 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 And how was that? And anyone else? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Obviously, there are no correct ways to do this. it's the invitation to begin, and however it takes us, whether it's to merging with this larger body or to transforming into other ways of being. It's to take us out of that kind of somewhat narrow view we can hold at times, and to connect with something that is quite more vast, and that yet has all these bumps and blockages and different aspects to it, but it's all part of one. Um, I'm mindful of our time here, and I'm mindful that the people who are connecting from a distance will not be joining us this afternoon. So hopefully we can continue these conversations about the river, over lunch and into the afternoon. But I want to touch on a few more pieces of information to be sure that they have it, and then we might or might not have time for another quick exercise. What I wanted to talk about was the medicine wheel, and there are so many different medicine wheels, and I do not profess to be an expert on any of them. But I did study what was presented to me as the Inca medicine wheel for a number of years. I probably 8 or 10 years. Um, Again, I look at it as a different way of engaging our lives. And during the course of those studies, we approached it from many different mindsets or many different intentions. But what was true of it, and consistently throughout were some of the aspects of it. So in the medicine wheel, as I was taught it, there were typically we worked with 4 directions, and you might think of it visually as 4 quadrants. And this afternoon, for those who are staying on, we're actually going to be doing some hands-on work with the medicine wheel. But what we would look at was the 4 directions, and they would be the direction of the south, the north, the south, the west, the north, and the east. The south, in this tradition that I was trained in, was the direction of the serpent, and it had to do with that part of ourselves that we needed to shed, that past that we needed to shed. The work of the west was the animal we associated it with was the jaguar. And that was the creature that leaped from that which was dying into that which was to be life-giving. And some of the work that we did with that was to look at what is it that has been our legacy, say, left to us by our circumstances, by our parents and elders. What is it that has been left to us? And what do we want to claim as the legacy? And what parts of that are things we need to let go of? What parts of that are ways of death that we do not want to bring forward with us? The work of the North we associated with the hummingbird. And the work in that area was associated with the ancient ones. And again, what is the wisdom that we want to inform us? And part of the work connected with the North, that's a part of the work associated with the North was to release our teachers. What that means is to integrate the teaching that really speaks to us as truth, but let go of the teachers. A way to describe that is, so often when people study, particularly in the spiritual practice, but in any way, people study with someone for years, and the teaching can be so immersed with the teacher. And sometimes that leads to all sorts of difficulty if there's a falling out with the teacher, or if there is if there's a need for the student to move in a different direction. So whether the teacher is someone that has just been encountered, someone that's been sought out, or whether the teacher is even in a broader scheme of things, maybe it's an event, but it's to release the teacher, but hold on to the teacher. And then the path of the East is known as the path of the eagle or condor. And that's seen as the path of the visionary. And it's also a path of creation. The shaman would talk about what is being brought into being. As part of the practices with the medicine wheel, we would, with the training that I participated in, we tended to meet every 3 months or so. And during that time between meetings, we would very much try to connect with those creatures that I described to you. So the first one might be to connect with the serpent and really look deeper in terms of what was it that we needed to share. What did we need to let go of? I can remember with the West and the cougar, the jaguar. I had a cat at the time, and my cat really freaked during my time in the West. I think I went from being the only feline in the house to not being the biggest feline in the house, but there was something about connecting with that energy, that that willingness to lead. The hummingbird, typically we would focus on how do we taste the nectar of life? You know, how do we not get so bogged down in the stuff that we miss the nectar? And with the eagle and condor, it was a perception of seeing from such a different place. I mean, if you think about an eagle, it's looking down. If an eagle is soaring, it's looking down over the universe. And it just has such a different perspective than when we're right down there at serpent level or jaguar level. It's a different way of engaging. So those were the parts of the medicine wheel as I studied them. Very different in different traditions. I also studied the medicine wheel under Rosalind Breyer after things in our life kind of take us in different directions. And I found myself in a situation of, again, this deep longing to understand more about healing. And Rosalind is a very gifted healer, and I'm going to have information sheets for all of you, and they look like the strangest conglomeration of resources when you look at them, but they're just reflective of my journey and people who I held very dear as teachers throughout this last 30 years. But so Rosalind, when she would teach the medicine wheel, she would teach it as different phases of our life, in 3-year segments, and what house might we be in during that segment of our life. And could be very informative. If you Google her and then you Google medicine wheel, you'll see what that looks like. I didn't want to copy it. It's on the information sheet. I've seen it again, and where a medicine wheel is done is an earth sculpture. And people will walk through the medicine wheel much like they might walk through a labyrinth. And so there's so many different ways to look at it. Recently at my church, there was a guest speaker who's working on a book. And they had found this very old prayer wheel that nobody really fully understands. It went out of use centuries ago, and there were no descriptions as to how it had come into being, what it meant, but they translated it from the Latin. But I love the idea of here is yet another circular thing, part of the Christian tradition that has been lost, and that now people are trying to recover. So, however we work with that, if we had more time this morning, what I would encourage us to do is take that river that we had just done and look at it in the context of the circle, of the medicine wheel. And as I said, for those who are staying on, we will be doing work with the medicine wheel after lunch. But I noticed by the thought with your drawing, you were working in a circle.
Right, yeah. I started explaining at one time you need to do it in power, and so you know, step of circles.
Yeah, but there is that, I think we tend to look at life as linear, and yet there is this circular aspect. We might find that we encounter similar barriers. We might encounter similar openings. I look particularly at my life now, and there are so many times when I feel I have gone full circle. I mean, the fact that I'm here talking about this subject in many ways is a going full circle from back with my studies back in the 1980s. And there's a gift in that. There's a feeling in that, and we can see that yes, something that was planted back here, we're seeing the fruit of, whether it's a week later or 30 years later. So we will work with the medicine wheel, and for those who are connected by distance, we will leave lots of little markings along the trail. I did want to talk about this resource list because it seemed like this might be one of the simplest ways that I could sum up some things here for this morning. Actually, maybe we could pass these out. Because, as I said, it's kind of a strange combination of stuff. And I think that's the gift of our journey. We can only plan so many things. We can only think our way to so many different points. But if we go back to my very frustrating Jungian analyst, Albert, and follow our noses, it's quite amazing what we might be drawn to. So one of the first things I had on here was Chogyam Trungpa. Sometimes it's Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, and his book Shambhala, The Sacred Path of the Warrior. Shambhala should be underlined too, by error. But with that book particularly, I think that was how I learned to be present to what was going on, and to kind of not let whatever was happening consume me. To not have to push away from it because it was feeling scary. To not be involved in my own emotions. But it was just a very powerful, and I studied Shambhala meditation for several years. But that was an opening for me. Pema Chodron, The Wisdom of No Escape, was a long-term student of Chogyam Trungpa, and I love her work. It's all about meditation. Much of it is written in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, but it's very beautiful work. It's very accessible. Paulo Coelho, The Alchemist. I love that book. And when I think about our journeys, there is that tendency sometimes, I think, where we feel like we have to go find whatever it is we're seeking out there. And this is such a beautiful book to bring us back home. Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell, those were very formative resources for me early on. Alberto Villoldo, I studied with Alberto for, probably about 8 years. The book that got me started was his Four Winds. He now has, I think it's the Four Winds Society. I was very fortunate in that I studied with him when he was still doing much of his teaching. And I don't know to what extent he is still teaching now, but he also has, since this, published many more books. One of them, I think I have reference to it, Shaman Healers Sage. And these are both very interesting books to give you a flavor of that discipline from his standpoint. Lower down on the list, I also referenced Sandra Ingerman. She and Andreas Arlen, they are not people I've studied with. I mentioned them because of the name above them, Victoria Wilson Jones. But there are so many people that will teach things like shamanism, and based on what Victoria has said to me, she feels very comfortable with those two. And she has studied with Sandra. I'll tell you more about Victoria as we go down. Ted Andrews' Animal Speak. Is anybody familiar with that book? It's a wonderful book if one wants to start connecting with animals in a different way. And I think there's another book somewhere that's called Plant Speak or something like that, but Ted Andrews is a great resource. Rosen Greer, I mentioned earlier, her book is Wheels of Light. When I'd been studying with Alberto, I reached one of those other junctures in life that a physical illness that claimed someone who's very dear to me. And Alberto would always talk about once something manifests physically, there's very little you can do. Rosalind, on the other hand, my basic Western doctor kept telling me I needed to study with her because he had studied with her for many years. And she would talk about how you work with illness energetically. And she's a very wonderful teacher. She is who she is. But I studied with her for a number of years just to better understand how she approached healing, what she did. She has not written many books. That's just not her thing. So, but she is, if you're familiar with people like Barbara Brennan, if you're familiar with the discipline of healing touch, many of those are outgrowths of her original work, which dates back 30 years. John O'Donohue, I just love his writing, and John Philip Newell. One of the things that was a bridge for me back into more mainstream Christianity was the Celtic, because the Celtic is so nature-based and also so mystical. And so those were both beautiful resources for me. And I put David White in that category, even though he was more recent, just the last, say, 5 years. Eckhart Tolle, he's written many books, but the one I was referencing was this. Does anybody have this book, seen this book? Well, being a creature lover, as I am, and now I have a dog, this is one of the most accessible books one could ever read in terms of being present and being with nature. And it's illustrated. I mean, this is an easy read. Let me see if I can just find, like, to be aware of little quiet things. You need to be quiet inside. Many subtle sounds of nature, the rustling of leaves, raindrops falling, the humming of an insect, the first bird song of dawn. Give yourself completely to the act of listening. Beyond the sounds, there is something greater. Sacredness that cannot be understood. We thought. It's a wonderful little book. It stars a dog and a cat. I commend it to you. Victoria Wilson Jones, she is the person that I presently spend time with. She has done a lot of integrative work. She was a longtime student of Ken Wilber, and she does some shamanic journeying work. She has not written books, but she has a very lovely website, and on the website there are some wonderful meditations. I understand that you all spent some time working with chakras last time you all were together, and she has some beautiful chakra meditations. So I commend her website to you. And then I listed some poets down at the bottom. I brought all sorts of poetry with me. I don't know if we're going to get to any of it, but we have copies for you, but we will get to at least one here. I think I started to try to organize these by category, by whatever. If it was by category, there would be 6 or 8 other books one could mention. So I just organized it by my encounters. And I'm not saying that these would be right for any of you. But what you might do is, if you have curiosity about anything we've talked about, these would be some starting points. And if not, find your own starting point. And what I have found in reflection is that there's that awareness of what it is that speaks to me. And it's what I spoke to you all about initially. What speaks to me is usually nature. What speaks to me is usually spirit. And what speaks to me is a longing for healing. Those are what speak to me. I think it's important for each of us to understand what it is that calls to us most deeply. Yours may be very different from those. But that helps us figure out, okay, what is that next step? What is our nose pointing at? And do we give ourselves permission to explore? And with that, I know we're running up against lunch. I hate to stand between people and food. Mostly because I have great mercy on anyone who tries to stand between me and food. But does anybody have any questions or comments before we? Yes. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. And part of me wants to say all of the above, if I understood what all of the above were. I'm not sure I understood all of them, but I'd say, what I would say is probably approach them as teachers. And so, for example, in that time between sessions, I might try to learn what I could about, well, for example, the jaguar. So I might go to a source like that Animal Speak book and try to understand how they live, what it is they respond to. They have a heightened sense of being able to track, being able to notice things. There's a boldness in how they engage in life. I might be asking myself, what can the jaguar teach me? I mean, where is it that I'd like to bring more fierceness into my life? Where is it that I'd like to bring more cunning? What do I need to become more aware of in my environment? But I would say there was language used, and different language in all disciplines, but there would be language used like spirit animals or car animals. The desire was to allow back to teaching. So, for example, we'll work with the stones a bit this afternoon. And I'll be asking probably the question, what is that stone? What could that stone teach you? Some of my most profound teachers have been trees. And connecting with the tree in a different way, saying, okay, what is the teaching? And tell me, I think one of my first experiences was connecting with the mountain that way. So it's kind of a little bit when you were talking about your experience of the water flowing into the river. In that experience, and not to say this was what it was like for you, but it could be that you were finding yourself merged with something that was very different, and yet it was a natural flow. And so when I connect with, let's say, a tree, my intent is to open myself to that tree, to kind of begin to feel like, what is it like? What is this tree experience? I mean, is this tree just trying to get a little light and it's covered over by all these other things, or is this tree look like it's half dead? What is going on with this tree? But not in a word standpoint, but just kind of like, what is it saying to me? Is it speaking of perseverance? Is it speaking of growth? Is it speaking of deep roots? What is the language about truth in it? So it could be similar to one of these animals. Does that make sense? Any other questions before then? And if there's anything that you found like totally weird, please don't hesitate to bring it up. I understand fully how weird some of this stuff can sound. Yes.
I went to rehab in Minnesota,
Mm-hmm.
and Minnesota, well, no, state mosquito.
I've experienced Minnesota mosquitoes.
Yes.
Yes.
But anyway, there was a typical Minnesotan who taught me this. He said the reason God invented the fly was so that the mosquito wouldn't get
That sounds like a lovely thing to start lunch on. Okay. Anything else that I can hand over to you?
So what I would say for those of you that have been visiting with us, you all have my email address. So if there's something that is of interest of you, I have all this information like the poems. You say, oh man, I really would like copies of the poems that Joyce has brought. Just email me, or if you have questions, and I'm confident, or should ask Joyce, it'd be okay to email you as well. Could I share your email address where they could chat with you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would like to just send us off with the poem.
And that would be a lovely way to go for lunch. And then we'll gather back up in an hour. So at 1:30, if you could be back, then we'll get going again.
Just to kind of close this morning, there's a William Stafford poem that is called Ask Me. Yeah, familiar with it? Yeah, it's about the river. So, sometime when the river is ice, ask me mistakes I have made. Ask me whether what I have done is my love. Others have come in a slow way into my thought, and some have tried to help or to hurt. Ask me what difference their strongest love or hate has made. I will listen to what you say. You and I can turn and look at the silent river and wait. We know the current is there, hidden. And there are comings and goings from miles away that hold the stillness exactly before us. What the river says, that is what I say. William Stafford. Have a wonderful lunch.